So I have a problem. I've got a table saw and I have a whole bunch of projects I want to work on, but I don't have a crosscut sled. So that's really holding me back. So today I'm going to try to solve that. Now the table on my saw is 20 inches wide. So I'm just going to go ahead and make the sled 20 inches wide. So now that my piece is very slightly under 20 inches wide, I need to decide how deep I want my sled to be. I want it to be wider than it is deep. And I don't plan on doing anything, too crazy. I think I'm going to stick to 14 inches. Now for the runners, I decided a while ago that I wanted to use the ones that came on this miter gauge. I actually got two when I bought the saw, and the other one's a lot nicer than this, so why not use it? And I picked up a Ryobi 12-inch bandsaw a while ago, and it came with a really crappy plastic miter gauge. Okay, well, I have a small issue. This is the miter gauge that came with the Ryobi saw. If you compare the two, it is significantly narrower. So that's not going to do any good. Looking at this, I think that this is long enough to just cut in half and have a couple short rails. Okay, time to mark some holes for to affix these to the bottom of my base plate. And we're back with a new memory card. Hooray. Okay, so I had decided that we're just going to forget this hole, use this existing one, which was like 2.1 inches from the end, and then we will add two matching ones over here and one more here on the end.
Polish these guys up when we're done.
I really hate these. I would prefer one with a hammer, but this is what I've got around at the moment. Let me see if I can find a center punch. And I'm back. As I'm sure you can tell, we're very neat and tidy around here. Pay no mind to how far off center that hole is. My biggest issue at the moment, I want that side to be the bottom, is going to be how to mark the positions for these two rails. Now, the first one ought to be easy enough. I'll just, set it up, space it off from the side a given amount. The distance between the edge of the saw table and the edge of the rail. But the second one needs to be very precisely aligned with the first. So I think what I'm going to do is attach one of them and then start thinking about how to position the other one in the rail and mark locations for these holes based on that. The table saw at the edge is 5 5/16 from the closest edge of the track. Unfortunately, since I can't rely on myself to drill straight holes, actually these ones look pretty good, but I just really can't rely on that. So I can't just mark, that plus half the width of this and then set my screws. I'm going to have to mark a line that far from the edge, put the edge of this against that line, and then I'm going to clamp it down and drill some pilot holes and screw this down. Okay, so I have the piece lined up with my mark. I've clamped it down. The spacing at the front and the back is not even because I don't have any long reach clamps, and this is the best I can do. So it's about 2.5 inches up from the bottom, and I will match that with the other piece when I get to it. I am going to very carefully align the pilot bit with the center of the hole. And I will check it all the way around because this matters. It would be best not to be eyeballing this, but I'm just going to go for it.
And I definitely do not want to come all the way back out through the other side. That would be bad. Well, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it wouldn't look very pretty. Okay.
Well, let's hope that that bit of movement to the side is matched by the other one. It was not. I can maybe shim that a tiny bit. It doesn't have to be much. Let's see what we got. This is a piece of fine grit sandpaper.
Okay.
That actually worked. Okay. Now I just need to trim off the extra. And we'll see how that runs in the saw. And we'll start thinking about getting that other one affixed. Okay, so it fits pretty well. It slides. And now you'll be able to see the reason why I definitely need 2 rails. That is not going to work. Now I need to figure out how I'm going to mark the second one. Okay, so I just had a thought. To get my spacing up from the end, actually won't be that hard because I can just bring the rail all the way to this end here, and you can see I've set the screws that I'm going to use facing up in the countersunk holes. Place the second rail also right at the end. Maybe. Okay, right there. Make sure that the other one is still right at the end of the travel. Give it a light tap. And I have a pair of marks. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I can, and I guess that's what's most important. I can make it fit in there, but it's a little sticky, which is obviously not ideal. You know, before I do anything else, I'm going to try oiling the rails a little bit. That's a lot better. It's not perfect, but it's no longer, you know, stopping and starting. I think that's good enough. So next step, since this is actually going really well, I'm going to need a board across the front and a board across the back. The back board needs to be very precisely aligned so it is 90 degrees to the table saw blade. The first one, however, is just there to hold the sled together after I've cut it down the middle. So what I'm going to do is I will place one along the front. I will cut most of the way through, leaving a little bit at the end, and then I will place this on the saw with some squares and some clamps on the blade and on my backing piece. This is the piece I'm going to use for both the front and the back. It's just 2x6 that was laying around. There's a bit of a bow down at that end, so I'm not going to use that end. But before I do anything else, I'm going to hit it on the jointer, get a nice flat bottom. The other sides don't really matter nearly as much, but I want the bottom to be nice and flat. This table saw is actually a combo unit. It shares a motor with the jointer, and I'll show you how that all works in just a moment. Okay, so you can see down at the bottom here's the motor. This is the belt that drives the table saw. If I go ahead and pull that off, the motor is now free to run without driving the table saw. I have a second belt here because these are different lengths. And I am now set up to run the jointer. Okay, so here's the jointer again. Unfortunately, after doing a little bit of measuring, I'm going to need enough of this board that I can't entirely exclude the bowed section. So the bowed section is going to be the front because it is not dimensionally important. It's just kind of holding the thing together. I'm going to go ahead and joint the bottom surface. Hopefully you can see how that is a nice sharp corner here. The surface is pretty flat. You can see there are a couple nicks in the planer knives. I mean, I didn't replace them when I got the unit used. I just honed them on some 600 grit sandpaper, so there's some nicks, but that's fine with me. So now I need to figure out how I'm going to cut this to width. The ideal thing would be a crosscut sled, but, well, I mean, there's only one problem with that. Okay, my saw is back in table saw mode. I need to raise the blade a little bit, I think. Yeah. Just a few turns. Much more precise and careful with the back piece. See, it's nice and flat, but it is, I'm sure you can probably see there, horrifically bowed. But that's okay. I don't want that front board to be so tall, so I am going to rip this down a little bit. Okay, and we're back at the workbench. Here's my piece with my jointed side and the other side cut on the table saw. This needs to be fixed here. So to glue to this, since this is pre-finished, I'm going to have to scrape or sand off the finish. So what I'm finding is that this pre-finished, or whatever they use for the finish, is pretty thick. So I am going to go ahead and get out some sandpaper, just some, here's some 80 grit, that'll do. Okay, that ought to do just fine.
Need to get one of those little silicone Easter brushes. This is supposed to be pretty good for glue. Alright.
So I'm going to get the ends nice and lined up. The bow is this way. So if I really feel like it later, I can, go nuts with a sander and take that off. Okay, because I am impatient and I want this to be an afternoon project and not a 3-day project, I'm going to go ahead and screw this on so that I don't have to wait the full cure time, just enough to make sure there's no more squeezing out. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes. So normally you'd leave the glue dry at least half an hour, but since I've got screws in here, I'm going to call that good enough. I can center that and hopefully figure out some way to clamp my back piece nice and perpendicular to the saw blade. Okay, so trying to line this up made me realize I'm really going to have to do the thing that I didn't want to do, which is joint this side here flat. It's just too bowed. It's just not going to work if I don't do it. That was terrifying. So here's my problem. If I set this side to be perpendicular to the saw blade, then this side is decidedly not. I had another thought. It all depends on how good of a job I did getting this face perpendicular to the saw. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is reference this face basically. I'm going to just rely on how close that is, and I will space it ever so slightly. Maybe. That might not be a good idea, because there's no real adjusting that after the fact. Well, if I screw it, pull it back apart, and then do it. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to screw it on, see how close it is, fix it if it's not. Flush, just a little proud there.
I'm not going to make the same mistake last time. Helps if you put it in the right gear.
Okay, test fit number 2. Awesome. Yeah, that's really good. Now let's see how far out the other side is. That is not nearly as bad as I expected. Okay. So the battery in the camera died right as I started applying the glue, so there was no stopping for that. Alright, so the glue is pretty much set at this point. I'm going to go ahead and cut the slit the rest of the way through, and then I will get to finishing. Of course, that bit that I wanted to knock down on the bandsaw won't fit on the bandsaw. Alright, all the coarse sanding's done, so I'm switching over to the palm sander to, I mean, that was only 80 grit on the belt sander. This is probably 120, then I'll go to at least 240. Alright. I have some knobs that I'm going to stick up here. Just something to stick your hands on while you're using it. And then I'll put some oil on the 2x4s and call it done. Be smarter than this. There we go. Okay. Alright, so I'm just going to put a couple coats of Danish oil on all of the unfinished surfaces. It's done! Well, that was definitely a long video, almost half an hour long, and that was not entirely on accident. I wanted to show my thought process as I came to each obstacle along the way. Please, if you have any suggestions, tips, or ideas, comment them below. This is obviously a new channel, so I'll have plenty of time to respond to everyone's comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to have some more content, hopefully a more interesting project, coming soon. Thank you.